Today, we dive into the legendary origins of Rome, a story where myth meets reality, shaping the eternal city that would rule an empire. In the very heart of Rome's origin is the tale of two brothers, Romulus and Remus, born under unusual circumstances. Their mother, Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin, was said to have been visited by the war god Mars, resulting in the birth of twins. Because of their divine father and the breach of her vows, Rhea Silvia's uncle, the king of Alba Longa, ordered the infants to be cast into the Tiber River to die. Instead of perishing, the twins survived. The river carried them safely in a basket to the foot of Palatine Hill. Here, according to legend, a she-wolf, an animal sacred to Mars, found and nursed them. A shepherd named Faustulus stumbled upon the miraculous scene. Moved by their plight, he and his wife, Acca Laurentia, took the boys in and raised them as her own. As Romulus and Remus grew, so did their strength and leadership. Unaware of their royal blood, they became leaders among the shepherds and farmers, eventually clashing with the king's herdsmen. This confrontation led them to discover their true origins. Motivated by a mixture of revenge and destiny, they overthrew their great uncle and set out to establish a city of their own. Choosing the site for their new city led to the first of many disputes. Romulus preferred the Palatine Hill. Remus argued for the Aventine Hill. To resolve this, they resorted to an ancient practice, interpreting the will of gods through the flight of birds. Each brother positioned himself on his chosen hill, waiting for a sign. Romulus saw 12 eagles, while Remus saw only 6. Taking this as divine approval, Romulus began outlining the city's boundaries. The boundary ritual was sacred. Romulus took a plow and with an ox and a cow, began to trace a furrow around Palatine Hill, marking where the walls would rise. This act signified not just a physical, but spiritual protection for the fledgling city. It was during this ritual that the next and most tragic part of the story unfolded. As Romulus worked, Remus, either in jest or in scorn, leapt over the incomplete wall. To Romulus, this act was grave sacrilege, and in the heart of the moment, he killed his brother. "So perish anyone who crosses these walls," he declared. While this dramatic episode underscores the seriousness of boundary violations in Roman culture, it likely veils a deeper, more complex origin story. Most historians now agree that the narrative of Romulus and Remus is a myth, blending elements of legend with the possible political realities of early Rome. The actual formation of Rome was likely far less theatrical and more a matter of practical and social evolution. Archaeological evidence suggests that what would have become Rome started as a series of small settlements spread across 7 hills by the Tiber River. These hills provided strategic advantages for defense and control over the river, crucial for trade and water supply. Around the time traditionally cited as the founding of Rome, around 753 BC, there is evidence of increased collaboration and unification among these hilltop communities. This unification was driven by the need for shared defense mechanisms and more structured governance as the population grew and external threats became more pronounced. This gradual unification likely involved treaties, marriages, and alliances more than heroic battles or divine signs. The story of a single founder could have been created or embellished as a unifying symbol by later leaders, especially as the Republic sought to justify its expansion and authority. Romulus, whether a real figure or not, became a potent emblem of Rome's strength, leadership, and divine favor. Additionally, the ritual of tracing the city's boundaries with a plow, while dramatized in myth, reflects actual practices of ancient city planning. Such rituals underscored the sacred nature of the city space and were common in various ancient cultures to invoke divine protection and order. In essence, Rome's foundation likely stemmed from pragmatic social and political developments among a cluster of tribal communities, gradually coalescing into a city-state that valued legal order, military might, and civic unity, principles that would define its empire for centuries. The story of Romulus and Remus has woven itself into the very fabric of Roman identity. It highlighted values such as bravery, leadership, and importantly, the favor of the gods, qualities that would define Rome's public and political life. Kings and later emperors would draw on these myths to justify their rule. The idea that Rome had a divine origin helped solidify the notion of an empire with a manifest destiny. It was not just conquering for power, but fulfilling a role ordained by the gods. This narrative was crucial as Rome evolved from a kingdom to a republic and then to an empire, helping to unite the people under a common identity and history. The transition from monarchy to republic in Rome. How did the Romans overthrow a king and set up one of the most iconic republics in history? Let's find out. In ancient Rome, the king wielded immense power, but this wasn't always met with approval. By the late 6th century BC, dissatisfaction was brewing against the monarchy, especially under King Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, known as Tarquin the Proud. His tyranny and the actions of his family would catalyze a significant change. The tipping point came from a tragic event involving Lucretia, a noble woman wronged by Tarquin's son. Her subsequent death became a symbol of the oppression suffered under the monarchy. Outraged by this atrocity, Lucius Junius Brutus, a relative of the royal family, called upon the Romans to overthrow their king. The people rallied, and in 509 BC, they expelled Tarquin the Proud, vowing never to be ruled by a king again. Thus ended the era of the Roman monarchy, giving way to a new republican form of government. The abrupt departure of the monarchy left a substantial power vacuum in Rome. What would fill this void? The Romans, deeply wary of reverting to any form of tyrannical rule, were determined to innovate a system that would safeguard against concentration of power. Their solution was both radical and visionary: the establishment of the consulship. This dual office, held by two elected consuls, was designed to split the highest civic authority, ensuring that no single individual could wield supreme power. Each consul held office for only 1 year and possessed the ability to veto decisions made by the other, thereby creating a built-in check against potential abuse of power. This system was a direct response to the injustices perceived under the kings, particularly the last king, Tarquin the Proud, whose reign had ended in tyranny and revolt. To further distribute authority, the Romans formalized the role of the Senate, a body that had existed in less defined forms even during the monarchy. Now recognized officially, the Senate was composed of leaders from noble families known as patricians. These senators were not merely figureheads, but powerful statesmen who shaped legislative and foreign policies. The Senate's role was advisory but influential. It guided the consuls, ratified their decisions, and played a pivotal role in emergencies such as wars and crises. Moreover, the Senate was responsible for handling financial affairs, controlling public revenues, and allocating funds, including those for military expenditures and public works. Its members, often seasoned politicians and former consuls, provided a continuity of governance that balanced the relatively short terms of elected officials. This structure allowed Rome to develop a sophisticated system of checks and balances that curtailed the rise of any new autocrat and ensured a broader distribution of power among Rome's elite. This innovative political architecture laid the foundational principles of Roman Republic governance. It reflected a profound shift from monarchic rule to a form of democracy that, while limited to a subset of the population, offered a new vision of civic administration based on shared responsibility and legal restraint. The joy of the new republic was, however, not universally shared. While the patricians adapted quickly to the new political landscape, enjoying power and privileges, the plebeians, common farmers, artisans, and soldiers, found themselves largely excluded from the political process. They could vote, but not hold most official positions, which led to significant social and economic disparities. Tensions escalated, leading to the first succession of the plebes in the early 5th century BC. The plebeians, fed up with their lack of influence and protection, withdrew en masse from the city, leaving it defenseless. This nonviolent protest forced the patricians to negotiate, resulting in the creation of the tribune of the plebes. This new office had the power to intervene on behalf of the plebeians and veto unfair laws proposed by the Senate and consuls, providing a critical check on the power of the patrician class. Further reforms followed, including the laws of the 12 Tables, Rome's first set of written laws, drafted by a special commission of patricians and plebeians. These laws were a foundational step towards greater legal transparency and equality, setting a legal framework that allowed for more inclusive governance. The early Republican period was marked by significant reforms that influenced the political landscape for centuries to come. The establishment of a republic based on shared power and checks and balances was revolutionary. These early conflicts and resolutions between patricians and plebeians shaped a governance system that, far from perfect, aimed to balance the needs and rights of different social groups within Rome. The legacy of this period is profound. It set precedents for governance that influenced not only the later Roman Empire, but also modern political systems. Concepts like the separation of powers, the rule of law, and civil rights movements find echoes in Rome's early republican structure. The Punic Wars, a struggle that lasted over a century and fundamentally shaped the course of Western civilization. These wars between Rome and Carthage were driven by strategic and economic motivations and would determine the fate of the Mediterranean world. The First Punic War began in 264 BC, sparked by competition for control over Sicily, a valuable hub for trade and military power. Rome, emerging as a regional power, faced Carthage, the dominant naval force. The war was primarily naval, where Rome, initially inexperienced, built a large fleet inspired by a captured Carthaginian ship. Innovations such as the corvus, a boarding bridge, allowed Romans to leverage their superior infantry tactics at sea. After 2 decades of costly warfare, the decisive Battle of the Aegean Islands in 241 BC saw Rome's navy outmaneuver and defeat the Carthaginians, forcing them to sue for peace. The harsh peace treaty stripped Carthage of its Sicilian territories and imposed a crippling indemnity, laying the groundwork for future conflicts. The Second Punic War, which began in 218 BC, was marked by the Carthaginian general Hannibal's audacious strategy, his legendary crossing of the Alps into Italy with a diverse army which included war elephants. This bold move into the Roman heartland was a military gambit that brought the war to the Romans' doorstep. Hannibal's tactical genius shone at the Battle of Cannae, where his smaller forces encircled and annihilated a much larger Roman army. This battle remains one of the greatest tactical feats in military history and sent shockwaves through Rome. Although Hannibal's inability to secure strategic Italian cities and garner significant allies limited his long-term success. Despite these devastating defeats, Rome displayed remarkable resilience. The Roman response did not involve direct confrontation with Hannibal. Instead, they fortified their cities, wore down his forces through attrition, and strategically avoided engagement, biding their time while keeping Hannibal isolated in Italy. The turning point came when a young and dynamic Roman commander, Scipio Africanus, took the bold step of invading North Africa. This strategy drew Hannibal out of Italy and back to defend Carthage. The climax of the Second Punic War came at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, where Scipio faced Hannibal in a direct confrontation. Employing brilliant tactics and leveraging his alliances, particularly with the Numidian cavalry, Scipio managed to defeat Hannibal, marking a decisive end to the war. The peace treaty imposed by Rome stripped Carthage of its remaining territories outside of Africa, reduced its navies, and prevented it from waging war without Roman permission, thereby securing Rome's dominance in the Mediterranean. The Third Punic War from 149 to 146 BC marked the final chapter in Rome's conflict with Carthage. Despite Carthage's significantly weakened state, Roman distrust and the desire for complete dominance led to the war's outbreak. After a prolonged siege, Roman forces finally destroyed Carthage in 146 BC. The city was razed and its lands were annexed to the Roman province of Africa. This brutal conclusion not only ended Carthaginian resistance, but also demonstrated Rome's unchallenged power and heralded a new era of expansion and prosperity for Rome. The aftermath of the Punic Wars saw Rome emerge as the supreme power in the Mediterranean. These wars had profound impacts. They spurred Rome's military innovations, expanded its territories, and led to the assimilation of diverse peoples into the Roman system. Rome's victory in the Punic Wars set the stage for its transformation from a regional power into a sprawling empire that would dominate the ancient world for centuries. Reflecting on the legacy of the Punic Wars, we see how these conflicts were pivotal in shaping not only just Rome, but also the entire course of Mediterranean history. The wars demonstrated the importance of strategic vision, military innovation, and the resilience in the face of adversity. They also underscored the harsh realities of ancient warfare, where the vanquished could face utter destruction. As we conclude the exploration of the Punic Wars, consider how these monumental events shifted the balance of power and set foundations for the Roman Empire. What were the most crucial turning points within these wars? How did the personalities of leaders like Hannibal and Scipio influence the outcomes? These questions invite us to think deeply about the interplay of leadership, strategy, and historical circumstances in shaping the world. Imagine a world where one man's decisions could reshape the fate of an entire civilization. This is the story of Julius Caesar, a name that not only transformed Rome, but also marked the dramatic conclusion of its republic. Today we explore how Caesar climbed to the peak of power, ignited a civil war, and met a fate that forever altered the course of Roman history. Join us as we uncover the life of a leader whose legacy continues to captivate us thousands of years later. Julius Caesar began his ascent not as a dictator, but a charismatic figure adept at forming strategic alliances. With Pompey and Crassus, he created the first triumvirate, a powerful alliance that catapulted him to the top of Roman politics. His military conquests, especially in Gaul, secured him unparalleled respect and devotion from his soldiers, setting the stage for his historic rise. In a decision that would define his legacy, Caesar stood at the Rubicon River, a boundary that no general should cross with an army. In 49 BC, facing the ultimatum from the Senate to disband his army or face prosecution, Caesar chose a path of no return. The phrase "crossing the Rubicon" now symbolizes making an irreversible decision. With the words "Ali acta est," the die is cast, he led his troops into Rome. Not just crossing a geographical line, but also crossing into outright rebellion against the Roman Senate. This bold move plunged Rome into a civil war. The conflict swiftly demonstrated Caesar's military genius and his ability to secure loyalty from both his troops and many Roman citizens. As he vanquished his enemies and pardoned many of his Roman adversaries, Caesar consolidated his power, declaring himself dictator. This was initially a temporary position granted during emergencies, but Caesar's hold on it began to look anything but temporary. As a dictator, Caesar initiated a series of reforms aimed at stabilizing and improving Roman society. He restructured the debt laws, reformed the calendar, introducing the Julian calendar, which is the precursor to what most of the world uses today, and redistributed public lands to veterans and the poor. These actions, while improving his standing with the common people, also sowed deep resentments among the elite, who saw his power as a direct threat to their status and the traditional republican values. Caesar's reforms as a dictator not only aimed to stabilize Roman society, but inadvertently catalyzed a shift in the balance of power with the republic. Addressing issues such as debt, land distribution, and the calendar, Caesar sought to bolster his support among the populace. However, these measures challenged the entrenched interests of the Roman elite, who viewed them as an affront to their privileged position and the traditional values of the republic. The redistribution of land to the veterans and the poor in particular exacerbated tensions, eroding the economic dominance long enjoyed by the aristocracy. Consequently, Caesar's reforms not only garnered him favor among the common people, but also sowed the seeds of discontent among the ruling class, setting the stage for the dramatic events that would unfold on the Ides of March. The culmination of these tensions came on the Ides of March 44 BC. Fearing that Caesar intended to proclaim himself king, a group of senators conspired against him. Led by Brutus and Cassius, they assassinated Caesar in the Senate on a day he least expected betrayal from those he considered allies. His death was not the end, but a new beginning of chaos and further conflict of Rome. The assassination did little to restore the Republic, as the conspirators had hoped. Instead, it led to another round of civil wars, which ultimately ended the Roman Republic. Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, later known as Augustus, outmaneuvered all rivals, including Antony and Cleopatra, in 27 BC. He was granted powers that effectively made him the first Roman emperor, signaling the rise of the Roman Empire and the end of the Republic. The transition from republic to empire marked a significant shift in Rome's trajectory, fundamentally altering its political dynamics. As the empire emerged, Rome's territorial reach expanded further, extending its influence across vast regions. Concurrently, the administrative apparatus of the state underwent a process of centralization, concentrating power within the imperial bureaucracy. This shift towards centralized authority under the emperor redefined the distribution of power, diminishing the role of the Senate. This new political framework would shape Rome's course for centuries, guiding it through periods of remarkable growth and enduring challenges. As we reflect on the life and actions of Julius Caesar, it becomes evident how a single leader's vision and decision can alter the course of history. Caesar's legacy is complex. He was a military genius, a populist, a reformer, yet also a usurper of the Republican ideas. His life reminds us the fine line between heroism and tyranny, between the will for change and the grab for power. What do you think about Julius Caesar's impact on Rome? Was he a hero who did what was necessary for Rome's survival, or a tyrant who destroyed the Republic for personal gain? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more insightful history explorations.